Work sessions called to order. We need to go identify ourselves.
Okay. Are we on the
Pete,
record?
Pete Peterson,
Forrest Dunbar.
John Weddleton.
do training.
Are we actually recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
She records everything.
Yeah.
Okay, this is on AO 2017-98. And basically, what does it do for us? It's your ordinance.
Sure. Well, unfortunately, Dean couldn't be here today. He wrote it, obviously, and I would have liked to have him present, but I want to do this work session before I left for Mongolia because there won't be time. I'm going to get back from Mongolia on August 6th, and then we have a public hearing set for August 8th.
I like the beard, by the way. Is that?
It's coming off
It's
tomorrow.
going up. I was going in country.
No, I've got to shave it tomorrow. Yeah, so basically what it does is we renamed the park, and you guys will get to vote on this on the 25th of July. We renamed the park at DeBar. We named, actually, initially a park at DeBar and Muldoon, the new park that was called sort of colloquially Muldoon Town Square Park, but that was never its official name. So we put together a naming panel. They're going to recommend the name Chanshnu Muldoon Park. And in that process, when we put together that naming panel, which had Aaron Leggett on it, who is he's on the board of Kluna, and he's also an Alaska Native linguist, we recognized that in our existing naming code, we don't have a place for indigenous names. So we kind of shoehorned it into, if you look on page 2 of this document, line 7, we sort of shoehorned it into the word cultural. That was like, well, cultural, the indigenous name could be cultural. But it wasn't explicit. And so what this does is it doesn't require that public places get indigenous names, but it just says you have to consider them. That's basically it. So we could walk through this. You can see the first section there, broadly speaking, just saying, when you give a public property historic, cultural, geographic significance, considering location, function, prior indigenous names, and natural features, the existing name of the public place, including a traditional Dena'ina or other Alaska Native name, is presumed to be the best name of that public place. So the we went with Dena'ina, but we also included other Alaska Native because, frankly, neither me nor Dean is like a cultural anthropologist, and Anchorage is a very big place, so there might be places just out of Anchorage where actually some other language or some other indigenous people, has a more established, we weren't sure. So we made it a little bit broader than just Dena'ina. Although we know that Dena'ina and the Klu'na people were the primary group in this area, but we didn't know about Girdwood or out in the Chugach or something. Let's see. The next one, this is like the Denali exception. So if you look at on page 30 or line 37, 36, 37 on page 2, we put that in there for when the state or federal government decides to rename a place, like to Denali. Let's see, next page. Same thing. Yeah, so the first section B there, again, is just same kind of thing, inserting that Dena'ina or the Alaska Native group is considered. The last one is a little bit different from the rest of the ordinance. The last 3397.030 and the following one, 090, that was suggested by the Ombudsman. This is where the Ombudsman comes in. So we had called the naming panels for public places, we had called them citizen naming panels, but the truth is you can be a non-citizen and serve on them if you are a legal permanent resident, for example. So there was an example of a University of Alaska professor who was here but was from Europe somewhere and served on a naming panel because they had expertise on the area.
Do you ever get that wrapped around the word citizen?
What's that?
Have they got wrapped that?
No, it's not a big deal. It was just something that Daryl suggested it to be a more accurate representation of what they actually are. So we're changing it from citizen naming panel to public naming panel. And that's it. That's the whole ordinance. Not a big deal. Or I should say, not a very complicated ordinance.
It's coming up on the 25th?
No. So I set the, I introduced it on the 11th, but I set the public hearing date out till August 8th so that I could be there to answer questions and to have that debate.
So the Chugach State Park, advisory board like 4 years or more ago, changed the name of Powerline Path, which we all call that path, so it's not very colorful, to an Athabasca name that goes on forever.
Oh, really?
In fact, there was never a traditional name for that valley, apparently.
Yeah.
So they just chose something that says the river, and I can't for life remember, but that's kind of a nice gesture. And
Sure.
It'll just show up on maps. People haven't changed even close.
So Fred Dyson, someone member Dyson, he asked to be added as a co-sponsor because he had done some work at this at the state level. Apparently, it's much more of a hassle at the state level, and it is always more of a hassle to rename
Because you're
something.
dealing with different tribes. You've got Aleuts, you've got...
Well, that's true, but I think it has more to do with like their sort of legal structure. It sounded like it was difficult, and you had to fight the federal government at some point. He says, and he sent a letter. I don't know if you guys got that on Tuesday night. He gave us a letter that he had written about this, but this doesn't have to do so much with renaming. This has to do more with naming new places. And so I think the actual time this will be used will be relatively infrequent because when you're naming a building, for example, there's no traditional indigenous name for a new building that we build. It's more when we have a new place to name, and a lot of our places already have names, right? So we happen to have this new park. You know, we don't have a ton of new parks coming online. Yeah, I think it won't be used too frequently, and we are at this point not pushing to rename a bunch of things. I think that actually will come at some point where certain things there'll be a push to rename Chester Creek, for example. I think that's probably one that there is some interest in renaming.
So what's the name of Chester Creek?
Chanchnu. So
Okay.
that's what this park is being called. There was never a man named Chester. It was an anglicized version of the indigenous word Chanchnu. They didn't like the word Chanchnu, so they called it Chester.
Interesting.
Yes, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I thought there was discussion of possibly when we were naming something, a native name or Athabascan or whatever, that they were going to put the English version below it so that tourists or whatever who don't, aren't from here and would never have any idea maybe how to pronounce it would maybe be able to find it on a map easier if there was.
Well, I think that in these, they're going to be, this doesn't address spelling or how it will appear on signage, but my understanding is because the last native people didn't have a written language, you usually write it out in Roman letters, so if you write it out in the same letters we use in English, so it shouldn't be, you should be able to at least read it. I know there are some that have they have a few extra letters, I know in some of them, but this doesn't deal with spelling. I know that, so what Fred talked about at the state was that they would have like the current name, the Anglo name, and then they would have like in italicized below it the indigenous name on signage.
Right.
That's not what this envisions because, if you have Chanchnu Park, there is no alternative, English name. It's just the name of the park. Just like we have Tikishla and we have, what's another one? Well, the Nina Center, and there are a couple of Takanu. Well, Takanu is a little different, but yeah, Takanu Commons. Takanu is the name of the body of water, actually. It's Cook-Inlet. It's actually Takanu. Chris, do you have anything to add to this, or any thoughts on this?
I have two comments. One, so in 2005, 6, and 7, when we were working on the Dena'ina Center, part of the reason that the embracing local native culture was adopted was at the Downtown Partnership, we had done a comprehensive tourist analysis. We were asking, what makes Anchorage unique? What are the things you like, et cetera. And one of the things that came across, and this was in a national survey that we hired somebody to do, and the number one thing that people identify, and I think is still true today, is that Anchorage doesn't have much of a cultural identity. It could be Seattle, it could be Spokane, it could be anywhere.
Could be Portland, could be anywhere.
Portland, and people really wanted something that was unique, that reflected and embraced the local culture. And it was at the time, it was really a big shift in the way that tourism and the city started thinking about things, and hence they fully embraced the idea of accentuating the Dena'ina culture for the Dena'ina Center, et cetera. Aaron Leggett, who is at the museum, was a big part of that. And so there was an effort for a long time to try and do that in as many ways as possible. I think this is a great realization of that.
Do you have a second thing? So you had two things.
Just to comment on the anglicized version, you know, some people find it helpful, some people find it confusing, but a lot of times what people will do is if you've got signage that's in a different language, whether it's a native language or not, they will put the phonetic
That's smart.
English underneath instead of trying to translate what the word means.
That's smart. Yeah, we don't have, like I said, this doesn't address spelling, but I think that's a good standard operating procedure as we go forward. Yeah, so I had heard about that, and Aaron talked to me about that. It was the survey. That survey as well. And when we were naming the park in Muldoon, we had considered that, and sort of the vision there is, I've been talking to Clutna, I've been talking to Seehaw, which has a ton of properties in that area, that we would try to have a lot more sort of traditional signage, or like, we could have descriptions of things in the tradition, like this is the word for, this kind of tree, that kind of thing, in the traditional language in Denina, and then people could kind of do a little cultural tour where they go to the Native Heritage Center, and then they would go to this park, and perhaps they would go to the botanical garden as well, and do kind of like a little tour of East Anchorage. So that's kind of the vision out there, at least. But I think it's I think it potentially has the ability to help brand the city too. And I did run this ordinance by a variety of Alaska Native leaders, and I think some of them will be showing up on August 8th.
I've got a question for you. I'm putting a naming commission together to name the tactical shooting range after Ted Smith.
Okay.
Is that going to be a problem? Do I have to deny his name or something, or what?
Ted Smith?
Ted Smith, he was a police officer. He taught shooting to the APD and was head of the SWAT team for years.
Okay.
He worked for us for about 25 years, died in an airplane accident.
No, you don't have to. First of all, that is a. There is no prior indigenous name for that shooting range, right? I mean, you're built a shooting range, so no. And even then, like, let's say you have a place where there is a prior indigenous name, but the locals have called it something forever, and that thing is appropriate, and you know what I mean? The naming commission just has to consider it. This is not dispositive. It just says you must consider the Denina name if you can identify it, or the indigenous name, but it doesn't mandate anybody to do anything.
What we got was about $13 million from the state to put a tactical shooting range in, to be for South Central police officers and military.
Sure.
So.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, again, I don't think this is going to be used that often, just because there are, there's no prior indigenous name for any street that we built either.
I got no problem with this. I just wanted to check and make sure, because I'm already in the process of getting the naming commission together.
Yep.
And sending it to this on my.
Okay, well, that's it. Do we have any other questions about this? I want to do
Any questions, gentlemen?
Well, I was just going to go over, I was on the State Affairs Committee when I was in the legislature, and that is the committee that gets referred to places, names, whatever. And you would go in there to the committee meeting thinking, well, this is going to be a slam dunk, this will take us 5 minutes. And you'd be there for an hour and a half as people would come up and testify, oh no, this should be named after so-and-so.
Right.
Or it's been called such and such forever, why do we want to change it now?
Right.
And so you may think that it was going to be easy, but it never seemed to be.
Well, we appointed, I'm trying to think, I think we appointed the naming commission, I want to say in October. We're just getting it now. It took us 8-9 months or more to get that thing named, to get that park named.
Our state's different than others because we don't have one group of natives up here. We've got different cultural groups up here.
Also true.
And when you look at Alaska, you can't just take like an Athabasca name and put it on North Slope. But it's a different group of people up there.
That's also true. All right.
So,
Anything else?
what a
We good?
recommendation on the committee?
Is there an indigenous
Well, we're a
name?
work.
It's a work session.
We're a work session. We
Work
can't do
session, I know.
names, can we? We can't do
It's also the
recommendations, can we?
policy committee, so it depends what you want to call it.
I don't need a recommendation. It's going to be in August. On August
I was
8th.
just trying to get you what you needed.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's fine. What was your question, John?
Is there an indigenous name for mating?
Ha! No, because they're an invasive species from Europe.
No indigenous name. Not allowed.
So what is the Denai name for birch cherry?
The bird cherry?
Yeah.
Killer of the moose. All right.
Okay.
Wait,
This
you
works.
need to hit the hammer.
I call
Thank you.